Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, which is entitled How I Would Hack You, Confessions of an Ethical Hacker. My name is Ted Halsey. I'm CEO of IronPath and your host for today's event. First, let's go through a few housekeeping items. All participants are in listen-only mode. Today's session will be recorded and circulated to all registrants. Thank you for joining the live session. Please submit your questions as we go along, and we will also have a dedicated Q&A section at the end of the formal presentation. Finally, we will send you a brief 4-question survey immediately following today's event. Please spend 2 minutes giving us a bit of your feedback. Today's webinar is brought to you by a consortium of IT service providers serving your local community. Thank you to our sponsors. ACCI is headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama. IT Synergy serves the Phoenix and Denver metro areas. Protect Support is headquartered in Salt Lake City, and Sagacent is headquartered in San Jose, California, serving Silicon Valley and the greater San Francisco Bay Area. Now let me introduce our speaker. James Carroll is founder and principal at Secure Network Technologies. He is a professionally trained ethical hacker and penetration tester. When not hacking his clients' networks, Carroll is a frequent speaker and trainer at cybersecurity industry events. He also speaks frequently at industry events with non-technical senior management and leaders. Now let's get into it and turn things over to James. James, take it away.
Awesome. All right, Ted, thank you for the stellar introduction. Definitely appreciate that. We got a fun one for you today, and this is probably my favorite presentation to present. I call it, when I put these together, I always think, what's like a really cool, sexy name I can name this presentation, right? And the best one for this is like how I hacked you. We literally try to go over really the top 5 ways that we're able to hack into a network. And that's really what I do for a living, is I'm an ethical hacker. And, at the end of the day, I write all these reports for all these clients, and there's usually a common denominator there. I'm usually like, hey, these 5 things is almost on every single report. So the goal of this, let's throw it in a presentation, present it to some people. We try to keep it very non-technical, because at the core, a lot of this stuff isn't that technical, and tell you guys how to protect your business and yourselves, most importantly, from hackers and malicious actors. So without further ado, we'll make a little introduction here. I'm an information security engineer. I hate saying that all I do is hack, but that's literally kind of all I do. I get hired by clients. We work with some NFL teams, all the way down to 2-person credit unions, and the goal is the same, right? They have data they want to protect. They hire us to see how well they're protecting that data, and then put recommendations in place to say, hey, if you had a different firewall here, if you guys had better passwords there, we could have prevented this. Right there, that's my dog. That's my coworker for the last 2 months. His name's Duke. I was gonna bring him in here today, but the Amazon guy hasn't come yet, and him and the Amazon guy, they don't get along too well. I'll just tell you that. So your ears would be bleeding, I promise. So how I started hacking, and you'll see throughout this presentation that a lot of these slides are like, I get asked the same question over and over and over, and after about 40 times, you're like, I should probably put a slide in there about it. So how I started hacking, and as long as no one's gonna call the feds or anything like that, I'll share this story with you. But back in 2005, 2006, I was a big video game player. I'm still a big gamer. I love video games. Back at that time, it was Halo 2. That was my jam in 05. Like you couldn't touch me in 05 at Halo 2. But what we figured out is that we'd play online, we'd play against kids and people all over the world. And what I did is, the goal is to win, right? So I'd play a kid or play whoever from all over the world. If I get more kills than them, I win. If they somehow magically quit out of the game, I also win, right? You see where I'm going here? What I figured out is that there is a way where I could essentially turn their internet off. So I'd turn their internet off, and then they'd quit out, and then I'd automatically win. So what used to take people years to get to high levels, I was doing in weeks. And the method of that, I actually found a video of the video I used to learn how to do this, like over a decade ago. And it was Zone Alarm Pro, Cane Enable. I look back at this and I don't feel like it's that long ago, but like this is like XP. It feels like it's like literally forever ago. But it was great, and it was always funny because if you're playing the game from your house, right, and I denial of service you or something like that, not a whole lot of bad things happen. But you know, when people were playing on college campuses, and I'm hitting college campuses, they tend to have a little bit more monitoring and things like that. And after about the 15th letter in the mail my dad got, that was like, you know, there's some weird activity coming from your network. You know, I kind of had to own up to it. Like, yeah, Dad, you know, I'm not gonna be a professional video gamer, you know, but look, they always say if you're not cheating, you're not trying. I stand by that when it comes to video games. So that's how I got into hacking. A little bit of fun tidbit. 10 years, I mean, back then, I don't think it was illegal. Now that's 100% a felony. So I do not recommend doing that. So what's the format of this presentation? First and foremost, I always like touching on current events. In the hacking world right now, COVID-19 is huge on what we're seeing. Go over 2 different types of hacks, how these hacks occur, what I call the anatomy of the hacks. And this is my self-proclaimed 4 phases of poonage. It goes over literally start to finish of what happens when a company gets hacked and how we do these hacks. Open source intelligence gathering, which is always really fun. How we gain network access, how we gain user access, how we gain admin access, and then the bonus, which is once you get hacked, right? Once we're in the network, or once an attacker's in the network, where exactly does this data go? And it's kind of frightening at where it goes and how easy it is just for regular everyday people to access this data. All right, so what are the current events in Nerdland? Like I said, COVID-19 phishing is massive right now, absolutely skyrocketing. And hackers, you know, they don't care. They're opportunistic people. So you can see here, this was a COVID-19 quote unquote adjustment that came from a company. They got a phishing email. This was using Google Mail. So Google's kind enough to say, hey, this seems pretty dangerous, right? But there's still a lot of platforms out there that don't give you that benefit of the doubt. This one right here, this is actually a bunch of MIT students. So saying, hey, here's some new updates on the coronavirus. There's a PDF in there. When you click on the PDF, we'll just say some bad things start happening to your computer that you want to avoid. And then another really interesting one was on ZDNet, and they actually analyzed some of the COVID-19 based malware, and it completely rewrites your computer. So it wipes your MBR, your master boot record. So if you do this, I'm pretty sure what happens is there's a ransom on it. It says, hey, pay me like $5 grand in Bitcoin within 2 weeks. So we're going to rewrite your machine. And they just like scorch earth that bad boy. Like there's nothing left. So you're going to want to avoid this kind of stuff. And if you see emails or anything like that come in that are COVID-19 based, you know, just make sure you're extra cautious about it, because that is the trend right now, far and wide. All right, the 2 types of hacks. We got people hacks, and then we got system hacks, right? And you've probably heard about this before, but people hacks are mostly through social engineering. System hacks are mostly through misconfigurations, exploits, things like that. So how do people get hacked? And this is, you know, I hate saying this. I'm gonna say it. You know how like at the end of each year, I think it's like Webster or someone comes out with like the phrases that should die. People are your weakest link it's true, but it's a phrase that should die because everyone uses it. Salespeople love it, but it's true, right? People are your weakest link, and social engineering exploits that. For those of you that don't know, I always go over a pretty exciting social engineering example where I started social engineering before I even knew what social engineering was. Basically, I was 17, 18 years old, grew up in a small town called Utica. And, you know, Friday, Saturday night, not a whole lot to do. What do we want to do? Well, we want to drink alcohol. Issue is we're 17, 18 years old. So what I would do is I'd find a gas station close to a construction site, put on construction clothes, get them all dirty, go into the gas station, and my whole ruse here would be like, you know, hey, I don't have my ID. I work in the construction site. I've lost my wallet a million times. I just got $40. Can you help me out? About 9 times out of 10 it would work. Pro tip though, it's got to be a sketchy gas station, right? Like Valero, Red Apple. Don't go to the Sunoco's. If there is an Indian reservation, don't even think about going to those one near you, because they will hose. Those guys have their own police force. They will hose you every time. Sketchier the better. That is the motto to live by when we're talking about hacking. All right. So clearly for this, we got phishing. That's emails to you, pre-texting. Like the IRS phone calls you get, right? Those are big this time of year, saying that you owe 15 grand in back taxes. If you don't pay, they're going to send you to jail. Baiting, that's a very interesting one, where actually what attackers do is they take flash drives, load malware on them, leave them in parking lots outside congested areas. People coming to work in the morning, look on the ground, there's a flash drive. First thing a lot of people do with those flash drives, they go into work and they go, man, I can't wait to see what's on this puppy, and they plug that thing in and infect the whole network. Vishing, which is like the automated Microsoft phone calls people get that say, you know, hey, your computer's out of date, your computer's infected. Then the most fun social engineering that exists, which is physically breaking into buildings. And we've done crazy, crazy engagements for this. We've actually shipped a guy in a box through FedEx with life support, like into a building to get in. So, I mean, usually it's not that crazy. That one Wall Street Journal wrote about. It's actually on our website if you're interested. But a lot of fun stuff there. But people are your weakest link, right? Most of the hacks that we see, and when we do forensics and we're looking through a system, people go, I don't know how I got hacked. You know, all the employees, we educate them once a decade, and you know their passwords are all password 123. I have no idea how we got hacked. What we do is I just look through the email log and I'm like, dude, your spam filter is non-existent. Your people are clicking on every single email that comes through. I think phishing and social engineering's the main culprit there. Okay.
Yeah,
So how does this happen?
James, before we leave phishing, can you just you glanced over it pretty quick, but can you just give some very common examples of phishing attacks that are occurring today?
Sure. So right now, there's actually a really, really big one where it's called, it's actually a sextortion attack. So what attackers are doing is they're finding passwords for you on the internet, and then they're emailing you. The title of the email is your password. Then the whole thing's an extortion email. It's basically like, hey, I have your password. If you don't pay me 15 grand in Bitcoin, I'm sending all your data to hackers and all sorts of other people. That's the big one right now. Typically what you'll see is like a fake invoice. So if you're in accounts payable, accounts receivable, you'll get a Word document or PDF in your email. It'll be from someone you might know, someone you might not know. And I'll be like, hey, you know, please see the updated invoice. As soon as you open that up, oftentimes your computer gets infected. Right now, those are the two big ones that we see. The invoice one, right? If you're in accounting or a finance department of your organization, you want to be super, super skeptical, mostly of Word documents. So what I always tell people is, you know, invoices, POs, things like that, usually come in PDFs. If someone's sending in a Word document, you want to be a little more cautious there, because Word documents are more harmful than PDFs because they enable macros and all sorts of other fun stuff. So
right,
be careful there. All right. So how do people get hacked? This is a video of us breaking into a building, and I told you guys we've like shipped people into buildings, we've done all sorts of crazy stuff, but normally it's as easy as this. And if we watch top right, we're gonna watch a guy walk in. I had to blur his face out. He scans his badge, looks back at my colleague Eric, goes, he looks pretty legit. Looks back at me, goes, he looks pretty legit, and he lets us right into the building. And you know, there's all sorts of crazy stuff we can do to get in. We can try to be FedEx. We can try to be, you know, repairman. We can try to be the fire department. Also a felony. Don't recommend that. Or we can just follow people into a building, and that's called tailgating. That is by far the #1 way and the easiest way to get in. We actually had fake badges on in this example. I don't know if you can see it. So if you look on Eric's waist right here, he's got a badge, I got a badge. We literally just put our pictures on there and our names. And actually the guy looked down at the badge after he scanned his real badge and was like, yeah, I'll just let these guys in. So if you work for a larger organization, right, we have hundreds of people, or even not, and you know, someone's following you and you go, I've never seen this person before, don't be afraid to ask them, hey, who are you? Who are you? Who are you here to see? Who are you with? Make them scan their badge every single time if you have that, because you never know, someone might have got fired the day before, coming in the next day to steal data. We've seen crazy stuff like that happen all the time. So this stuff does happen, right? Inside of that box that I was holding, if you see it, we had flash drives. So what we did is we took flash drives, got them printed up a flash bay. I think we printed 1,000 of these things, and we put the company logo on them, and we started handing them out to people. So we broke into the building, handing out flash drives. Those flash drives had malware on them. So we want to infect every machine we can. So we literally put them in fish bowls in the middle there, left them in the break room. On the right, this was really frightening because these guys operate these like $1 million brake presses and automated welders and crazy machinery. And we couldn't get access to that because we didn't have safety goggles, believe it or not. So we actually found these guys in the break room. We go, hey, you guys, this guy's like, yeah, I'm the main machine operator. Go, hey, can you hand these out to everyone on the floor? Because we can't get down there. He took 2 fish bowls full of these things and handed them out to everyone. So he's plugging in the brake presses. They're getting infected. I'm getting all sorts of hits. I'm like, dude, this is nuts. That wasn't the craziest part, though. The craziest part was we left them in fish bowls like that in the middle all over the building. About a month later, I'm sitting in my office, and every time someone opens one of these, I get an email, and all of a sudden I'm getting tons and tons of emails from Las Vegas. Like that's where they're opening. I'm like, how the heck do these things make it from New York to Las Vegas? Well, it turns out marketing got the flash drives, and they go, "Oh, we got a big trade show in Vegas. How awesome would it be if we had all this branded material to hand out, right?" So they're handing out these flash drives. Everyone that walks by their booth, they're plugging them in their laptops. They're bringing them back to their office. And I call the guy that runs their IT. I'm like, "Dude, we got a big problem here." Luckily, we had a little kill switch on there, so the world was saved. But you know, some of these stories you can't make up. But just goes to show you, right? If you find flash drives, and you know, right now it's kind of, I mean, flash drives are a pretty easy commodity, right? They crank those things out like Doritos. But you know, if you find a flash drive and it's got your favorite Frozen character on it or something, you got to use that thing. Give it to IT. Make sure it's wiped before you use it, because this stuff does happen, especially if you live in a big city. Crazy,
Hey,
crazy
James,
stuff. Yep.
James, it might make sense to just for a moment explain for our audience, you know, what is pen testing? How and why do companies hire you guys? Because I mean, what I don't want people to do is skip from your Halo story to these other stories and miss the connection that in all these situations, these latter situations, you've been hired by the organization to test their defenses. But talk a little bit about pen testing and how you work with your commercial clients with their authorization to do some of this testing.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. So all the examples I gave where we break into the buildings and doing stuff like that, that's what we do for a living. So that's physical pen testing, network pen testing. Pretty much we're under contract with clients and they say, "Hey, we want you to try to hack us. We want you to try to break into a facility." If they have a facility that, you know, for example, one of our clients, they house a lot of the power for the Northeast, and if someone breaks into the building, that's a big threat to them. They hire us to try to get in. So we do all the reconnaissance, figure out where they are, you know, who the guards are, what their, you know, maiden names are, what their family members' names are. And we try to exploit them through social engineering to gain access to the building and then hack the network. So pen testing is really what we're doing, and what we do for a living is testing security controls, whether that's network, whether that's physical, whether that's sending phishing emails to employees to get them to open links and download files and give us their password. That's all covered under what we do for a living. And really, you know, nothing's too crazy for us, right? I told you we shipped the guy in a box before. I mean, we're up for any challenge. Typically, it's, you know, test us from the outside, make sure no one get in, test us from the inside, make sure if someone does get in, they don't have access to data that they shouldn't have access to. But there are a lot of circumstances where, you know, we do some pretty crazy stuff, which we just went over.
Great.
Cool. All right, going over what a hack is and the anatomy of a hack. Phase one, we have open source intelligence gathering. Phase two, we're going to try and gain network access, and I'll go over all these phases in detail. Gain user access, gain admin access, and then once we gain admin access, I mean, it's pretty much game over. The goal of any pen tester, the goal of any hacker, is to gain admin access, because if they can gain the administrative, the account of a domain admin or a network admin, they have access to every database, every file, everything they could possibly imagine. The real goal, right, is can we go, and I call this a zero to hero, right, going from nothing to everything. Can it be done undetected? And if it can be done undetected, that's when a lot of the damage is done, because we'll do breaches and we'll do forensics where an attacker's been in the network for years, right, siphoning data out, and they've never had anything, that they don't have the right products and the right tools to detect any of that activity. So that's really the goal. And when we're doing a pen test, we want to replicate that, right? We want to act as the hackers do and try to be as sneaky and as silent as possible. Real quick, some tools of the trade. If you have any nerds in here watching and you're wondering what tools does James use to do his testing, these are the main ones here. The best part about most of these, with the exception of Burp, is that they're free. So they don't cost any money. You can literally go on the internet and download them. Metasploit, very well known. This one right here on the right is called Responder. I call this cheating because it's almost so easy to gain admin access. It's not even fair on most networks. You can run a script and within 10 minutes, you know, most of the time you're admin. Empire, which is that's actually how you build malware to hopefully bypass antivirus. And then Silent Trinity over here on the right, that's another tool to help build malware just to get the fly under the radar. So you can Google these. If you want links, email me. I'll show you links on where to get these from GitHub, but all free and all very lethal. All right. So what is open source intelligence? One of the ways I like to describe this now is if any guys watch Netflix, there's that Netflix series You, where there's Joe Goldberg, right? He kind of stalks people. That's what OSINT is. It's technically cyber stalking people. Joe kills them. We don't kill people, but we will cyber stalk them to try and get as much information about them as can, right? So we're talking social media. We're looking through everything, where they live, their address history, their marriage history. Anything they're posting on the internet is fair game when we're talking about OSINT and open source intelligence. So social media is by far the best way to get information. Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. I mean, the list goes on and on. I'm 29. I like to think I'm young and hip and I know all the social media sites, but I don't. I'll do this presentation at college and be like, oh, what about TikTok? What about VSCO? What about all? I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about right now. There is more social media sites than you know that exist. 1,000 plus is what the new number is that I've seen for social media sites. When we're talking about blog sites, over 152 million. Blog sites are huge, right? If you have an interest in something, there's at least one site out there, usually dozens of sites out there that speak to your interest. So for example, I have a dog, he's a golden doodle, moved into a new house. He went to eat his food. I'm like, what's going on here? I Google golden doodle not eating food. I found a dozen forums dedicated to golden doodles, like doodlekisses.com, doodlegang.com, I love my doodle.com. I mean, there's a plethora of them. So if you're thinking from an attacker standpoint, right, let's say you register on all those forums, you use the same username. If I'm an attacker, I Google your username, I can find your posts and your exposure on all those websites. I know what you're interested in, right? So now if I want to send you a phishing email, I can say it's from doodlekisses.com. You have a new message from an administrator. Please read it. You see it. Oh, I wonder what the admin messaged me. You open up that link and it's game over at that point. So social media for an attacker is a gold mine, absolute gold mine. So how can social media hurt you? One of the main ways that we're seeing, and one thing that we've done, is through password reset prompts. So an example is we did a job for a company, it was a big bank, and they said, use social media to hack us. I said, all right, we can probably do that. What we figured out is that when you go to their mail site and you forget your password, you hit, I forgot my password. Let's say Lindsay Walsh, forgot her password. I put Lindsay Walsh in, forgot password, and these questions come up here. So in order to reset her password, I have to answer 2 of these 3 questions correct. I'm not saying that I like to target 21 to 25-year-old females because they tend to post on social media a lot, but I do. Because that's just the highest rate. I'm gonna be honest with you, it's the highest rate of success, right? So Lindsay Walsh fit right into that category. Recent college graduate, tons of social media. So I said, well, let's do this. All I gotta do is answer 2 of these 3 questions. We're gonna turn to our trusty hacking tool, also known as Facebook, right? So I go on Facebook, I start looking up her name, I find her profile, and then I'm like, all right, well, now I just got to answer 2 of these 3 questions, right? If we think to the questions, one of them is, what's your favorite sports name? The other question was, what's the name of your favorite pet? So what I do is I scroll down, not even 20 pictures when I find this. And if we look here, right, we can see a picture of Lindsay with her dog. Her dog's wearing an Alabama jersey. I'm no expert, but if you dress your dog up in an Alabama jersey, your favorite sports team, probably Alabama. So I'm like, all right, I might have the answer to one of these questions. And then I'm like, well, I need to figure out what this dog's name is. And look no further than the caption of the photo, right? Hang with my pal Spike, hashtag roll tide. So I'm like, all right, well, in 5 minutes or less, can we hack this company? And what I did is I went back to the password reset. What's the name of your favorite pet? Put in Spike. What's your favorite sports team? Put in Alabama. Next thing you know, your password is Spike Rocks 19. And it was literally as easy as that. And we're talking about hacking your account, hacking your network. All right. So what are lessons that we learned here? And really, how could this company, this organization protected themselves better from this type of attack? One thing, don't put your life on social media, right? If you know that your password reset questions are things like, what's the name of your favorite pet? What's the name of your favorite sports team? Don't advertise on social media. Better yet, don't put it all under one picture. Because guys like me are going to go out there, we're going to try and hack you, and we're going to use that against you. For security phrases, this is how I treat it, right? If I have to register for a site or a service and they require security phrases, I put completely random data in it. Like they're almost like passwords. They'll just be completely random numbers. It's all gibberish. So if someone had to reset that password, I have them saved in a password manager or something like that, but they're probably not going to guess random stuff. The third thing is 2FA, right? If you use two-factor authentication, that would have prevented a lot of that stuff. So if it pinged her phone and she was smart to say, hey, I didn't try to reset my password, or hey, I'm not trying to log in from Syracuse when I'm in Utah. Usually that prevents a lot of this stuff. Also, if we think about the password reset procedure, having questions like that, having an employee base to answer questions that easily reset and that people can get on social media, definitely not the most secure mechanism to do that. So some issues
James,
there. Yep.
James, I think it's always useful the first time we talk about it. Can you give kind of a layman's explanation of 2FA? You know, what is it? How does it work? Very important, I think, at this point in the conversation.
For sure, for sure. So 2FA stands for two-factor authentication. Basically, if you try to log into a site or a service, let's say you try to log into your webmail, you use your username, you use your password. What it'll then do is it sends usually a token or a code to your cell phone, and then the website prompts for that. So you have to log in with something you know, which is your password, and then something you have, which is a code on your cell phone. So it's an extra form of authentication. I mean, really, if you think about it, you really don't even need a password at that point. It's an extra protection. But if you try to log in, it pings your phone for a password and says, prove you are who you say you are, then you enter that code into there, it'll authenticate you. Most of the breaches that we respond to could have been prevented by two-factor authentication. If someone put that on there, an administrator put that service on there, a lot of times they could have saved a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of heartache just by implementing it. Most big services, right, like your bank, even if you're using like cloud services like G Suite or Microsoft 365, they all support that out of the box. So it's literally a checkbox or just a configuration change you can make to make that service much more secure.
And in the case of Lindsay, just as an example, so despite all of her kind of bad habits of sharing all that information on social media, when you look to try to breach her corporate account, if she had had two-factor authentication on that, obviously she would have gotten like a prompt to say, hey, are you trying to log in, enter this code, and you would have been stopped in your tracks at that point.
Yeah. As long as she didn't like email the code, you know what I mean? Like a lot of what some hackers will do now, what we've seen is that they'll try to get the code too. So they'll send her a text or an email or something and try to get that code. As long as you don't give up that code, you're good. But normally they'll be like, hey, are you trying to log in from Syracuse, New York? And you're like, well, I'm not in Syracuse. You know what I mean? As long as you have that much sense to say something's not right here, you're usually pretty good. And we got some good, I have another presentation where I go over examples of that, but all right, this is one of my favorite stories. This one is what I call Diaper Man. And this is a story of how a company got hacked off a guy that had some weird interests. So what happened was we got hired by a company. They're like, hey, we got this guy on our network. He's an employee. He's doing, you know, we keep getting hacked. We notice he's got some weird browsing history. You know, we've had tons and tons of malware on our network. Can you come in and check it out? I'm like, all right, well, we can help you there. So we started doing our investigation. We noticed that this guy's computer was the culprit of literally tens of hacks. So tons of malware originating from his machine, going out to network shares, servers, all sorts of stuff. So we said, all right, well, let's try and figure out this malware. Let's see what he's doing. Like, let's see what's going on. What's causing all this malware to get inside of this network? And what we figured out is that there is some very interesting things here. So this guy, I'm going to use the word suffered, but he suffered from something called paraphilic infantilism. And what this is it's a psychosexual fetish with regressing to a baby. So what this guy would do is he would go on Craigslist and Backpages and all sorts of other websites that I can't post on here at work on his work computer, and he would network with other people who were into this kind of stuff. And what they would do is they'd schedule meetups where they'd all wear diapers and they had adult high chairs and they'd have binkies and they all get around, and that was their thing. That was their thing. And I mean, you go into this network, right, and you're looking at this guy's files and you're just seeing stuff like this, you know, just like giant man babies hanging out, and then people in big cribs and high chairs and just, you know, adult sized baby stuff, right? Like it was just some very strange stuff. So, you know, I can say that I've seen networks get hacked because guys had obsessions with being babies, and I don't think many people can say that, right? So this was crazy. I always share this story because first and foremost, right, the lessons we learned here is that people are weird. The people are into weird stuff, right? I mean, and it always seems to be the IT admin, but which is funny. But in this case, it was, right? Another thing is, if you're an admin of a company, you're a company executive, make sure you're blocking websites that have nothing to do with work. Craigslist, back pages, the kind of sites he was on with that kind of activity, probably not a whole lot of work stuff going on when he's accessing those sites. So making sure you filter those websites and having employees only go to websites that are work related are big. And then monitoring websites as well. So make sure you know where your employees are going. Send you alerts when they go to weird websites or try to go to weird websites, so you can squash that before anything bad happens there. Okay, so how does social engineering, how does this kind of stuff hurt you, part 3? So we did a job recently that's for a large hospital. I can't tell you the name, so I'm gonna use Cleveland Clinic as an example. And they said, hey, we want you to use social media to get patient data. So you can't hack us, you can't install malware, all you can use is social media and email. So all right, we'll take that challenge. So what we did is we used Facebook. So I'm gonna use Cleveland Clinic as the example here. So what we did is we went in Cleveland Clinic's Facebook page and we looked at Facebook reviews. And if you're a business owner and you have a customer facing business where you're business to consumer and you allow people to review services on your Facebook page, I'm not saying it's bad, but it definitely opens up some vulnerabilities because now anyone can go on there and figure out who you're doing business with. So in this event, Cleveland Clinic allowed people to review their Facebook page or review the service on their Facebook page. And we found a guy named Ken Flask, and Ken posted a ton of information, right? He said he's been going there since February 2016. He sees Dr. Kayuk. He comes from Sharon, Pennsylvania. I mean, just in that post alone, he's given us enough information to probably impersonate him or steal his identity. Not to mention, you just click on his name and you get right to his Facebook page. So we saw this review, we said, all right, this has a lot of information. Let's try and gain it. So what we do is we find Dr. Kayuk on Cleveland Clinic's Facebook page. We find his PA, Katie Cruz. So we know that these two work together. There's a professional relationship there. So the goal of what we're going to try and do, and what we've seen hackers do, is we're going to try to exploit that professional relationship to get Ken Flask's personal information. So what we do, we go on Spokio, which is like white pages. It gets a lot of information. We look up Ken Flask, find out his address history, who his relatives are, where he lives, his cell phone number, everything we possibly can about this guy, because we need enough information to try and pretend that we know who he is and we need to get his medical records. So what we do is we craft an email. We send the email from clevelandclinic.email, not clevelandclinic.com. We send it from supposedly Dr. Kayuk to Katie Cruz, which is his PA. And we say, hey, Katie, I'm out of the office. I'm on vacation. I'm at my lake house. Ken Flask called. He wants a referral. Can you shoot me over his last medical records from his last visit so I can refer him to the right physician? Katie sees that email, says, sure thing, doc. Next thing you know, she sends us over those records. And we got everything we need to compromise the identity. And it was literally that easy. We did 10 emails, and of the 10, 8 people actually responded with a PDF of medical records, which in healthcare is a massive, massive, massive no-no. So if Katie would have been educated, right, on social engineering, threat vectors like that, that probably could have been avoided. And the other thing, right, is if you're reviewing things on social media, I always say never review something on social media that has your data. So like banks, hospitals, healthcare providers, things that, hey, I don't really want someone knowing I do business or I'm a patient of this person. You shouldn't be reviewing. And if you own a business like that, I always tell them, it's something to consider is disable social media reviews so that people can't do that kind of stuff. You don't even open yourself up to that kind of vulnerability, because this is big and hackers do this all the time. One thing we always want to do, and we always recommend when we do an engagement, is making sure you keep your employees educated, right? Make sure they know that, hey, someone's going to try and impersonate a patient if they can. Someone's going to try and send an email from a domain that you don't own. Someone's going to try and impersonate an employee. They're going to abuse trust relationships online. Those are big when we're talking about how to stop this types of attacks and how to make sure employees know, hey, when I see this, I need to do this, right? If I see an email coming from a doctor and it's not from our email address, I got to report her. I got to call that doctor and say, hey, did you send this email? Because those right there could have prevented this type of attack and really compromising 8 people's personal identity. Those are big. All right. One thing I always stress in this presentation, because it's one thing that gets my blood boiling when I do a pen test, is passwords. And I know you're probably sitting there and a lot of people might be using these weak passwords. Just know that if you are, I am judging you, all right? I have no shame. There's no shame in my game when it comes to being harsh on people with bad passwords, all right? And I do tests all the time. One of them is for a very large company. I can't tell you the name, but what they use is they use what they call, I'm going to use air quotes here, best practices passwords, okay? If we look at Microsoft's website, the best practice, set minimum password length to at least a value of 8, right? People go, well, best practice, right? It says 8 characters. It says at least, right? At least a value of 8. Do you want to shoot, and I always say, do you want to shoot for bare minimum, right? Or do you want to be as secure as possible, right? Do you wake up in the morning and say, I should bring my kids to school today, but I really don't feel like, or I should be a decent, do you want to be a decent parent? Do you want to be a good parent? It's the same goes with security, right? Do you want to be kind of secure? Do you want to be as secure as possible? Okay. And a lot of compliance frameworks out there, like PCI, it's like, well, the compliancy framework says we need 8-character passwords, so we're going to do it. Compliancy does not equal security. And I fight this battle every single day. I'm like, 12-character passwords are what we recommend. Passphrases are what we recommend, and I'll go over more of that. People are like, well, what you're saying makes sense, and I agree with you, but to be compliant, we only need 8, so we're doing 8. I'm like, come on, you just say you're gonna do it and then never do it. Don't tell me that to my face, all right? Because that's just bad. All right. When we talk about 8-character passwords in a Windows environment, these passwords fly, okay? And don't even try to tell me these are secure passwords, because when I'm doing forensics and someone's like, oh, John Smith's account got hacked, go, John Smith, we're using one of these passwords. And chances are he's like, yeah, I was using password 1 with a capital P. I was using Spring 20 with a capital S. I was using Temp1234 with a capital T. Windows will let these passwords fly. These are passwords that can give an attacker access to your network. Okay. So think about how easy it is to guess this. Okay. An attacker, the first passwords I try are these ones right here. If you have 100 employees, I can just run a script, go down the list, guess all of these in a fraction of a second. It'll tell me who has it, and I'm in. And it's literally that easy. So do not use weak passwords. And I'll go over how we do that in a little bit. Another thing we talk about is password reuse. And people do this all the time. They got a great password, like, this password's the bomb. It's a secure password. It's 15 characters. I'm good to go. They go, you know what? This password, as a matter of fact, this password's so good, I'm going to use it for everything, because it's the only one I want to remember. The issue you come across here is what's called password reuse. So if you're using that password, let's say for LinkedIn, Twitter, MySpace, AOL email, God bless you if you still have an AOL email, but you're also using it for your corporate webmail. What would happen here is, let's say LinkedIn gets breached, okay? Let's say LinkedIn gets breached, your password gets compromised, an attacker gets that password, and then they go, you know what, John Smith at AOL.com, I'm going to try and get into your bank account, and using the same password. Yeah, that's a great 14-character password, it kills it, but you're using it for everything. So if one of those services is compromised, everything can get hosed. And there's actually a website you can go to that's called WeLeakInfo.to. You can pay, I think it's $15 a month, and you get access to all of the data in a breach in breaches. So LinkedIn, MySpace, Vertical Scope Forums, Ashley Madison, you name it, that data is up there. So I did an example for you. I searched the domain mkb.ru. It's like the 3rd largest bank in Russia. I stopped using American companies because I got in trouble. So we're going to use Russian companies for an example. And there was thousands of results, right? So these are all results of people's actual passwords that were breached. So let's say Mia at mkb.ru, she was using the very secure password of 4330, right? Super secure. So if I go on there and I see that password and I say, all right, let me take her email, let me try and log into bank accounts, let me try to log into Facebook, Twitter, and she's using that password for everything, I'm in, right? I'm in. So you want to make sure you're using unique passwords for everything. And I always recommend using a password manager like LastPass, or there's like Dashlane, there's a bunch out there to help manage those passwords to make sure you're not reusing it, because password reuse it's huge. Like phishing is the #1 cause of breaches right now. Password reuse is a close second. Every single year it goes up because people like to use the same password for everything. It's just inevitable. All right. So where do people try to use these passwords? Your VPN portal to get into your company, right? If I find a password, I'm going to put in your username, I'm going to put in your password, and I'm in. if you don't have
Hey,
two-factor authentication, of course.
hey, James. James, sorry to interrupt. Could you just explain how a password management service works? I kind of find the problem with them is that people who use them, they never they never look back, and they use them. And the people who don't use them, they have no clue how it works, and
Yep,
they don't
yep.
understand like how easy it is, how valuable it is. But could you just take a moment and explain how LastPass or these other types of services work?
Sure, sure. So LastPass, I'm going to use that because it's the one I use. So how I treat it is I treat it as a vault. Okay, so I have one password. It's a 58 character password. If you had a gun to my head and was like, "Give me your Facebook password," I honestly couldn't tell you it because all I know is that one password. It gets me into my vault, and then my vault has all my other randomly generated passwords. So let's say I'm logging into Facebook. What I do is I have my vault, log into my vault, grab my password from there, fill it into Facebook, and I'm good to go. A lot of them, like LastPass, they have a browser extension. So when you go to Facebook automatically, and once you log in for the day, it'll autofill your password into Facebook, so you never got to remember it, which is a blessing and a curse, right? So I travel a lot right now. I'm not traveling a lot, but I usually travel a lot. And LastPass is a nice phone app. I think it's free now. It used to be like $10. So I'm traveling. All I do is I go to my LastPass phone thing, right? And it uses Face ID to authenticate. And I can literally just log in and you can see there's my vault. I can go in and grab all my passwords in there with all my accounts. So if I want to log into, let's say, Amazon, I just click on this with my phone. I hit copy my password or launch my password right there, and I'm into my account. So really easy to use, and it really it really prevents against password reuse. It's the number one thing that we find that, when companies roll out password managers for everyone, password reuse goes way down because they now have a solution that they're being educated on, right? How to use it as well as the dangers if they don't use it.
Right. So just to reiterate one really important point. So what the password manager allows you to do is every service, Amazon, your Yahoo Mail, your Gmail, whatever, every service you're on, you can have a different randomly generated password, which you don't need to remember, which is highly secure. And then everything gets saved into this encrypted locker. And the only way into the locker is one long passphrase password that you can use to log into LastPass. And then via the various ways James just described, you can get access, you and only you can get access to those randomly generated usernames and password combos for these various services. So I just find like in my day-to-day life, talking with people and talking with clients, everything, it's like either people, they understand what a password locker service does and they're like completely bought in, or other people just don't understand it at all and aren't using it. So it's very easy to use. If you're not doing it, I encourage it. And if you are a leader in a company, password reuse is almost like an Achilles heel, because a lot of your employees are probably reusing their personal passwords on your corporate systems and various applications and systems, and it's a big problem. So anyway, back to you, James. Just wanted to.
Yep. No, yeah, no. A lot of people tell me like, hey, once I started using this, I never want to go back. Like it just makes life so much easier. So we definitely recommend that. We're trying to test passwords, right? VPN portals, mail portals, if I can get into mail and check that. And a lot of people like to email themselves passwords and sensitive files, and they store all sorts of things in mail that they probably shouldn't. Attacker and hackers know that. They'll try to gain access to that. Cloud services, right, are huge. Like I said, there's scripts out there where you can just load up a username and password, and they'll try to log into every single cloud service and then report back to you when it does and what that data is. So when hackers get passwords, these are what they're going after for sure, and it's what I go after. RDP, or remote desktop, what this is it's kind of a server that sits on your network that gives you access to it. This is the number one thing that's compromised if you have it. We always recommend using a VPN in favor of this, but what this allows a hacker to do is pretty much log into a server on your network externally, and then once they get in, that person's usually a local admin, and as you can see, they have access to a Windows environment remotely into your network. So this is if you have something like this, it's definitely something to consider, moving to a VPN or something else. But RDP, what we find is that it's usually misconfigured, and usually if a hack happens, this is the gateway into that. So just some food for thought there. So how do we hack it? Well, this is pretty much how we guess these passwords. I use a tool called Hydra. That's the logo right there. And this is the tool in use, right? It's actually really, really easy. I load a list of users, admin, JSmith, detailer, a list of passwords that I want to use. And I target a service, a login portal, and I say, all right, do your thing, guess away. And it literally just reports back to me on every time it got a correct password. So I can load in thousands of these. Hackers load in millions of these in millions of places, and they just let it rip. And at the end of the day, they look to see where they logged in. And a lot of times they're not targeting you specifically, but if you're the lowest hanging fruit and you got a password like this, they're gonna go in and they're gonna exploit you for everything you have. And tools like this help that. Automates the process, makes life a lot easier. So what are lessons we learned from passwords, right? Passphrases instead of passwords. So, what a password is, people might use Bluehouse1, right? That might be a good example of a password. What a passphrase is I live in a blue house on Maple Street 1. In my opinion, I might be a little biased, I will admit that, but I think that's just as easy to remember, but far more complex. And you can automate that and really just kind of streamline that with a password manager. 2FA helps, two-factor authentication. If you can, if it supports it, make sure you implement that. And unique passwords for each service, and that's where the password manager also comes in. All right, so recapping, right? We did our open source intelligence, found information about people, we used their passwords against them, and now we got user access. What we want to do now is, how do we go from a user to an administrator on a network? And basically what happens is one of these three methods. We abuse privileges, we abuse what we call trust relationships, and then we abuse misconfigurations and missing patches. And this is really, from an attacker standpoint, right? This is what I love to do, and this is where the fun begins. How do I go from user to admin? How many different ways can I do it? And this is this is probably the most satisfying part of the engagement for me. So how do we abuse privileges, and what's the real problem here? One of the main problems is that domain users or regular users on the network are usually administrators somewhere on that network. So let's take Judy, for example. Judy has a password of password 20, a very insecure password. But what happened is Judy needs access to QuickBooks, and she's not an admin on her computer. She can't use QuickBooks, so she submits a support ticket to IT. IT looks at it and they go, well, Judy needs access to QuickBooks. She has to be an admin to do it. So well, let's make her an admin on the PC, right? What can go wrong? What Judy can now do is she can use QuickBooks, but she can also do a bunch of other administrative functions on her machine. Like she can install The Sims and play that. She can watch the latest episodes of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. She can do anything and everything she wants on that computer because she is now an admin. One of the most concerning things she can do on that computer is install malware, right? Because she's an admin on that computer now. What keeping them non-administrator does is prevents them from installing software, any software. When they're an admin, they can install pretty much any software they want as an admin user. One of that is including malware. So once we find a domain user that has admin access somewhere, and usually it's to their own machine, we know that at that point it's going to be fun because we can install malware, we can do all sorts of bad stuff and gain information about the user, the employees, and the network. So that's where abusing privileges comes into play. And this is far and large the number one way we're going to gain admin access. So just recapping, right? We used Hydra, we guessed the password. Let's say we guessed it to RDP, which is an external service. Julie Smith at Acme Corp, password 20. What we then did is we installed malware on our computer, and Mimikatz is a type of malware that hackers use. We use it too. What it does is it allows you to gain plain text passwords. So let's say on Julie's machine, an admin logged in yesterday and they said we're installing updates. What this will do is it'll pull passwords that were used not just by Julie, but also by users that have logged in recently. So since she's admin, I can run malware. What that malware would do is you can see that malware would give me the plain text password of the users that logged in. So one of these users is service SQL analysis. The password, this is an OK password 99. Because she's admin, I'm able to run this. This gives me the passwords to admin to domain admin, network admin users. And at this point, once you have this, it's literally the crown jewels. I mean, it's game over, right? I can use that username and password to get access to everything on the network. And the goal is to do this undetected. And usually with this method, right, if you don't detect me up until this point, there's bad stuff that's going to happen. I can almost guarantee you that. Another way, right, we went over the people hacking and things like that, but another way that hackers gain access through misconfigurations. It is uncommon, but it does happen. And an example of that happened recently was FORTINET had a firewall, and there was a file disclosure vulnerability that disclosed literally usernames and passwords of users. So by using a web browser, you could go to a website for the firewall or the VPN, put in a path, and it will print you passwords of users. It was literally that easy. And what happened, and I mean, the news sites reported on it, Medium reported on it, Open Security reported on it, but for whatever reason, it didn't make as much news as, like, let's say, a Windows vulnerability. So we found a lot of these being exploited out there in the wild. So what I did is I found the exploit online, because hackers like me and researchers, what they do is when they find a vulnerability and when they find something that's vulnerable, they publish how to do it. And the reason for that is for researchers, but it's also, a little bit of a quill in your cap, if you will, right? You want to say, hey, I found this, I did it, this is how to do it. And exploiting this was insanely easy. So we use a technique that we call Google dorking, and this is literally using Google to hack a network, and it's the simplest hack you could possibly do. So what we do is we go to google.com and we search for this term right here: please log in URL remote-login. What this does, right, and we're familiar with Google, right, but what this will do is it'll search for sites that title please log in, and then a search for remote-login in the URL. This prints out to me all of the sites that are vulnerable to this vulnerability, because I know that FORTINET uses this terminology in their website and in their portals, so I can use that. What I can then do, and I found a bunch of results for that, is I go to one of these websites, and that website has literally plain text usernames and passwords for users. So you can see here I blurred it out, but we have M. Burgess, her password is Monday, Bo Barnes, her password is Lotus Notes. And if you look, I'm just in a Chrome web browser, I put in a path and I found that. When I searched this up, and this probably 3 weeks ago, there was over 2,000 results. So out there right now, there's 2,000 companies that are vulnerable to this, and there's domain and admin usernames and passwords on a website on their network that anyone in the world can use a web browser to access. And the fix for this is pretty simple. You update FORTINET or your FortiGate or whatever you're using, but a lot of people just don't know it exists. And that's why getting tested and doing pen testing and stuff, and what we do is important, because without it, you might not know that your company has vulnerabilities like this. The fun part of this is, I tried to be a nice guy, and I went on the internet and I found a company that was big and they had the vulnerability, and I found the IT admin on LinkedIn. I'm like, I'm going to be a good guy. I'm going to message this guy and let him know he's vulnerable. So I just sent him a message on LinkedIn. Hey, I'm a security researcher. During my research, I found that your VPN is vulnerable to this on your FORTINET VPN. He responds with, I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. And I was just, what do you say to that other than good luck? Like, you try to be a nice guy. You try to do some free work every now and then, right? You don't want to charge him anything. You just want to be a good guy. And this is the kind of response you get. Unbelievable. But what are you going to do? All right, real quick, I'll go over hacking SEO. This is kind of technical, but what happened here is we actually replicated a webmail portal for a company. So let's say the webmail portal is acme.webmail.com. We bought the domain acme-webmail.com, and we literally cloned like their Outlook portal. And what we found out by accident is that Google indexed the page for us. So what happened was, and this is really the problem, is what Google does is they spider the web for everything. They index pages, and then they report that page. So when you search, like, let's say you're a subcontractor for Acme, you search Acme Webmail, normally the real site comes up, but if my site's good enough, my fake page will actually beat them in the Google search results. So what I did is I registered this page, and next thing you know is I'm getting hits from all over the country on this page. And what I figured out is if when I search Acme Webmail, my fake webmail portal down here ranked higher than the real webmail portal. So when people wanted to find it, they Googled it, they went to Google, found mine first, clicked on it, logged into mine. Mine went nowhere, but gave me the user's password. Which is why, a lot of people put a lot of trust in Google, but we just showed you how you can exploit Google. Granted, Google is really good about this. It takes them about a week to sync back and take this offline, but don't trust Google as your end all. Like, hey, it ranked high in Google, so it's got to be legit. this was an example, and this was an accident. I actually registered this for a phishing engagement, and it was scheduled a month out, and in a week I started getting results. I'm like, this, I didn't even send an email. No one even knows this page exists, right? Google knew it existed, and that's how we got those passwords. So that was pretty crazy, right? And this was the portal they logged into that we got access to. So what happens at this point? Your network's hosed, you're hacked, your boss hates you, your wife left you, everyone, no one likes you anymore. I don't know if this audio clip will play through speakers. If it doesn't, that's fine. I'll tell you what happened, but it's not. Basically what happened was we're on a conference call, and this guy's network got hacked, and he starts flipping out, and he's a good client now. He was actually a friend. And he let me use it for the presentation, but it's an audio clip of literally him saying, his wife, my wife's in tears, my kid's in tears, my whole family's in tears, and then you just hear him take his keyboard and smash on the desk, and it's just dead silence after that. And you can hear my colleague Bob kind of chuckling in the background, but those are the hard conversations that you don't want to have. I mean, you do not want to get to that point. If you do, it's bad. But at that point, you're hacked and it's over. And where does your data go? We got about 4 minutes. I'll go over this real quick. One place it goes is the internet, and companies and hacking organizations will literally post your data on a website for anyone in the world to see. This is an example. This is called Maze ransomware. What they do is they hack you. They say, we want $2 million. The first $1 million gets your data back. The second $1 million prevents us from posting on our website for the world to see. And if you go to their website, there's literally just tons and tons of data from companies all over the world that they've hacked that say, hey, they didn't pay us $1 million. Here's all their data. And that's all their data, all their clients' data, a bunch of scary stuff out there. The second place it goes to is the dark web and dark web marketplaces. One of the best ones out there is actually called ssndob.cc. For $4, you can buy almost anyone in the country's social security number. And I did this presentation in Syracuse for an organization. I bought the mayor of Syracuse's social live in front of everyone. Hindsight, not the best idea. But it's $4. You can go on, and if you're over the age of 35, your social is probably in this database, and you got to pay in Bitcoin, obviously, because it's pseudo anonymous and not traceable. But I mean, I remember Kevin, who was our CEO, he joined the company, and in his first week, I bought a social on here, and he was a little unsettled, let's just say, by the results of that. And the funny part about this is, let's say I buy Kevin's social, a hacker goes on there, and they go, I want to buy Kevin's social because it's used, it's 50% off now. So instead of $4, it's $2. So they're businessmen, they know how to make that dollar work. All right. So at the conclusion of this, you got hacked, and we went over all the interesting and fun ways we can do it. So we'll start fielding questions at this point.
Yeah, so James, excellent presentation, very entertaining in some ways, darkly humorous in some ways too.
Right.
But let's go. So for everybody, we have a couple minutes. If you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A log, and then we'll try to wrap up real quick here right at the top of the hour. Let's see here. Tell me about your favorite password locker service and why do you recommend it?
Yeah, so I like LastPass a lot. I just, I was one of the guys that started out early with it, right? So I just kind of learned the interface and how it worked, and that's my favorite one. A lot of, like, even if you have an iPhone, right? A lot of the newer iOS for iPhone has it built into it. Like if you ever enter a password, it says, oh, do you want to save it to your password manager? And it's all built in and sleek. But I still like LastPass because it's cross-platform. I can use it on my iPhone, my work computer, my home computer. If I'm on the go, I know how to access it. But there's a list, and I can send you the list if you want, of 3 or 4 that we like to recommend. And pretty much all the big ones out there are good.
Okay, and then talk to me about so Mike wants to know, how do you feel about biometric logins?
Yeah, so I mean, biometrics is going to be the way of the future eventually. I think passwords at some point are going to go away, and it's all going to be like fingerprint, retina scanner, something like that. Because when you think about it, when people, passwords are inherently a problem, just the way it is. We can try to use two-factor and use LastPass to make them more secure. But at the end of the day, if you have a retina scanner, fingerprint scanner, I know like in China they use like the veins in your hand scanning and stuff like that. That's really the way of the future to prove you are who you say you are. So I think maybe in the next 10 years, hopefully, computers will be outfitted with that, and passwords will go away.
Okay, and another question is just talk to us about like doing a security risk assessment. And what is a security risk assessment? How important is it for, say maybe a small company who, really hasn't studied their security situation closely enough? How could that help them?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the goal of it, right, and to how I explain it, is we want to hack you before a hacker hacks you. That's really the goal. We try to hack you. We uncover all the vulnerabilities that a hacker would use. Then you guys implement the changes. You work with your MSP, and then we'll test it again to make sure you're secure. That's really the goal. It's to hack you before the actual bad guys do. And for companies that are doing it, I mean, back in the day, it's like 10 years ago, it was mostly just bigger companies that were required by compliance. But as we see more and more hacks occur, that trickles down, right? So now hackers, they look at the bigger companies, they've all gone through security assessments, they go through employer awareness training, they do all the stuff to protect them. So now they're starting to target the medium to small business market because they know, hey, the compliance is just getting down to them. A lot of them haven't done this yet. They're the weaker link and they're the weaker target. So now more than ever, it's important to focus on that. If you're a small to medium sized business, a lot of the, if you're like a healthcare or financial institution, your compliance probably requires it at least annually. If you're not, you should still get it done because hackers are going to go after you. They don't care who you are. If you have money that's green, they want it.
Okay, well, with that kind of sober reality, I think we're going to wrap. James Carroll, thank you very much with Secure Networks. Thank you very much for joining us today. For everybody on the line, we're going to be sharing copies of this presentation, and you can reach James here at his email if you have follow-up questions or are curious about a pen test engagement. I also want to just comment and again thank our sponsors for today's webinar. If you do feel like having a security risk assessment is something that your organization should do, all of the MSPs that are listed here do this every day for their clients to help them understand the vulnerabilities and risks in their business and how to go about mitigating them, how to do things like put in place two-factor authentication, train your employees on security, all those sorts of things. So with that, I think we're out of time. Thank you everybody for joining live on today's session. You all received copies of the recorded presentation. And finally, James, thanks again for a great presentation today.
Ted, thank you, and thanks everyone. Take care.